Okay, well, let's go ahead and get going. We'll have some more people come in, but want to be respectful of everybody's time, and we've got a whole bunch of good stuff to cover today. This should actually be kind of a pretty fun presentation. We talk a lot about integrations at HelpSocial, and what we have found in so many of the conversations for a long time is that people will understand the concept of it, but at the end of the day or at the end of the conversation, they ultimately end up saying, "Oh, okay, I think I get it, but what does it look like? What does it look like to integrate social media into some other customer service system or any other application?" Um, so that's what we want to talk about today. So by integrating, what we're really talking about here is removing social media from the silo that it usually exists in, and bringing those capabilities to other teams so that we can speed up responses, improve the quality of our service, and be able to scale our social response efforts when traffic volume gets really high. Um, I don't want to alarm anyone with the word integration. This is definitely not a coding class. We're not going to be teaching you how to write applications. We're going to keep this very visual. It's going to be high-level concepts. And if you want to get into a real technical call or get into the details later on about how it all works, we're certainly happy to get geeky with you. So today our agenda here looks like this. So we're going to set the stage. We're going to talk about largely across the industries how are things being done today. When we're approaching social media and integrating it into other systems, exactly why are we doing that? What problems are we solving? Why is this a big deal? When we do solve those problems, what do the outcomes look like? That's important because if we're going into a project here, we need to know what expectations to set. And then finally, we're going to look at how we do it. Again, we're not going to get real technical with code or anything like that. We're going to keep it very visual. So to kick us off, I want to introduce HelpSocial for just a second. I know there are people here that have not heard of us. We're a relatively new company. We're a young company. We've been in business for about 3 years, and we had a very unconventional start. I like to tell people that we were never supposed to be a company. That our products, our platform, it was never ever supposed to have a customer. We started inside of another company called Rackspace Hosting. We were employees there that were starting the social media support team. And back then, the vision was that we knew that we were going to have a marketing or communications team that was always going to be available in social media, but ultimately in customer service conversations, we wanted our technical support technicians to be the ones reaching out to help customers. So instead of someone saying, "I'm sorry for the trouble, we'll make sure this issue is taken care of," we wanted the technician right there to be able to say, "I'm sorry for the problem, how can I help you right now?" We wanted to be able to provide very fast, fanatical support. And so HelpSocial is kind of the result of that. We couldn't find a system or platform out there that would provide our marketing teams with a web dashboard to log into, but also with an API that could take all of those features and all the data and plug those into all the other systems we were using for customer service. So that's what HelpSocial is. That's how it got started. The reason why we got started and the reason that we are talking about this today is because of this right here. The way that customers communicate with us is evolving. Consumer behavior has changed. It is continuing to change. We saw this back at Rackspace. Our customers were becoming increasingly more willing to go to Twitter for help than they were to come in through one of the many support channels that we offered. Digital channels in general are growing very quickly. In customer service, they're becoming a preferred means of communication, and this is really across all age demographics. In general, if we take an average across the demographics, voice is definitely still the top preferred channel for customer service, but the digital trend is growing very quickly. Internationally, messaging networks, even above places like Facebook or live chat systems on the website, messaging apps are becoming a big standard. A lot of times when we think about this stuff, we attribute it to the millennials. Everybody writes posts and articles about them. We kind of treat the millennial generation as though they are kids. But the reality is that today many millennials have kids. They are not the little kids that we once thought they were. They are, as a generation, bigger than the baby boomers. They are becoming the biggest source of consumer purchasing in the economy. They're here. So all of the conversations that we've had in years past about how they're going to change things, it's changing. It's happening. It's the next generation beyond the millennials that's going to kick this into overdrive. Gartner recognizes that. They've been talking about this for a few years now, that in 2.5 years, 85% of the average enterprise customer service contact center is going to be digital. That's a big shift from years past, but we are on track on that prediction. Right now, today, 65% of the traffic flow into an average enterprise contact center is non-voice today. It's digital. There are a lot of different companies out there that will talk about this. Nintendo is always a great example that we bring up. They report that they deflected 80% of their voice traffic to digital channels. That was 2 years ago. We recently did a panel with another company that provides an online product that's very similar to Ancestry.com, genealogy and family history and things like that. And as you might guess, their customer age demographic was historically a little bit older. They brought in social media as an experiment to see if some of that might transfer or might deflect from the voice channels over to social channels. And for that demographic, not a whole lot changed. But what they found was that the younger demographics that were signing up for their service in the past, they would churn very quickly. When they rolled out social media, those customers were staying online. They were becoming customers and they were staying customers for much longer. So they saw their revenue grow, they saw customer retention improve just by offering social media as a customer service channel. Many new businesses, when they are getting going even today, are not offering voice as the first option anymore at all. If you go on many companies' websites, there's no phone number there. There's social media, there's you can fill out a contact form, you can send an email, but digital first is quickly becoming the trend. And there's a bunch of different reasons for this. One of the reasons is that in customer service, if you can reply very quickly, there's a lot of opportunity to do a lot of good here. The stats on the screen will show this. There's a lot of surveys out there that talk about these types of things. Great thing about social media is that if you're responding fast, that leads almost directly every time to increased customer satisfaction scores. NPS results, they start coming back higher. You're turning detractors into promoters, so you see referrals start increasing. There's a lot of opportunity just by being able to respond very quickly to digital channels. It's also less expensive to support. Across industries, across different types of contact center platforms, your average cost per phone conversation is about $6. That varies quite a bit. We've seen that as high as around $15. We've seen it as low as around $3 and something. So depending on your industry, the type of product you sell, and how long your calls are, and that type of stuff, that number can change quite a bit. But across industries, in almost every scenario that we see, the cost of a social media conversation is almost always less than $1 per conversation. And so there is a lot of consumer demand behind these channels. There's a lot of different reasons why why these are being pushed. But for the first time, businesses are able to now start calculating the value of the impact social media can make across the cost of service. There are also consequences to not doing this well. I don't mean to pick on British Airways here. This just happened to be a very good example that relates very closely to what we're talking to today. Um, just barely over a month ago, I logged onto Twitter and I happened to see this tweet. It was right in the middle of the page. If you're not familiar, Jenny Sussin is a Gartner analyst, and she happens to cover the social media space. So I thought that this would be very interesting to see. She sent this tweet. She's asking for help. How long is it going to take them to respond? You can see down below it took them 13 hours. So definitely some room to improve here. The tough thing for large brands in social media customer service is that, well, not even social media customer service, just customer service in general. We're competing on service levels across industries. If I go to Zappos and I have one type of customer service experience that's easy and it's simple and it's fast, why shouldn't I expect that from anybody else? I think that's kind of what we all want. Social media puts that on display. If I ask a question, I'm expecting a certain type of response. In general, those that go to social media for support are going there because it's a better use of their time. They want to be able to send a quick question, get a quick answer back. They don't want to be stuck on hold on the phone. They don't want to be stuck there with the phone on their ear waiting for the agent to find the answer to the question. They want to fire off a question and then go about their day, and when they get the answer back, then they've spent all of 3 seconds trying to solve that issue. The issue that we are trying to solve is displayed very, very well by this exchange. It took them 13 hours to just ask for information so that they could start helping. Again, I don't mean to pick on British Airways. Many, many, many large companies, the vast majority of companies are guilty of this. Now, British Airways could have, earlier in the day, they may have had some responses that came within minutes of customers sending a question. But the problem is that, just like most large brands, there is usually a technical gap between a social media team and between larger customer service. And it makes it nearly impossible for large brands to respond quickly on a consistent basis. So why is this? At most companies today, this is what social media looks like inside of a business. It's run out of a silo. Usually it's in the marketing department, might be corporate communications or community management, but we'll just kind of use the overall umbrella of marketing. It's usually inside of that one department. It's usually run out of an application or several applications that are disconnected from anything else. And largely, the social media software itself, it isn't necessarily at fault. The generation of social media platforms that we have today, all in general have kind of said, we will help you engage with your customers better. Social media software in general is still a very new market, so there hasn't been enough time for lots of things to be tried out and failed and things to be iterated upon. We're really just kind of in a second generation of platforms. And so it's true that it is much better today than it was when things were operating before. But what we've ended up doing is kind of creating a glass ceiling over our ability to improve service quality. It looks like the sky is the limit, but in reality, we've trapped ourselves inside of it. What we're realizing as large companies is that the same tactics and the same approaches, the same technology solutions that we used 5 years ago, they don't scale today, and certainly they won't scale 5 years from now. Just like the tools that we started using 5 years ago were so much better than the ones 5 years before that. At Rackspace, in our own story, we experienced all of this. We used all the same social platforms. They're largely built for marketing teams, with customer service features kind of added on, and those have expanded, and some of them are very good operating in a silo, but they usually don't work well with other internal systems. Off-the-shelf systems, they'll provide some light integrations, but it's still very limited. Data is usually trapped, so I know one of the things that we were constantly bound with was that if any other team around the business needed data from social media to make a decision, maybe it's a product team or an account team that wants to know what their customers are doing, that burden always fell on us because we were the only ones with the social media tools. So it created issues in resources just for us. And then in terms of just general customer service, the disconnect there is huge. If we didn't have the answer to a question, then we would resort to email or internal messaging systems, something that we could get in touch with the specialist that had the answer, and then we'd be going back and forth trying to find the answer to the question. Things fall through the cracks. All of this introduces friction into a service process that really needs to be smoothed out so that we can produce faster response times and consistent quality in our service levels. So what we're really talking about when we're discussing integrating social media is we're talking about breaking that silo of social media. We're not saying that social media should not belong in marketing. It definitely should, but it should be elsewhere as well. By integrating social capabilities with all the other systems that are used to help customers, we're removing that friction. In the contact center space, if you're familiar with that world, a lot of people talk about this as an omni-channel type of experience. So the idea is that at any point along the customer journey, whoever engages with that customer should have the context of their entire history and the capability to be able to help them. And if we can achieve that, then of course we're going to reduce our response times. We're going to provide higher quality service, and most importantly, we're going to be doing it in a way that scales. So if one channel is becoming busier than another, we can shift resources dynamically. Ultimately, these are the types of things that we're working towards. We want our platforms to work together. We don't want to have to hassle with reporting. If we can optimize processes, great, but it's even better if we can eliminate them. We don't want gaps in the places where people are trying to just help people. We want to bridge all of that stuff together. So usually it's at this point in time in the discussion where two questions come up. And so we want to introduce them here. I hope this doesn't derail us too much, but I think these are really important and we need to get them on the table and talk about them. So the first one that usually comes up is, okay, but when we go talk about this internally, how do we answer this question? Who owns social media? So for forever, at most companies, social media has always lived in marketing, and there's some territorial things around that. There's some land grab type of things around that. Sometimes this becomes a political discussion. It shouldn't be. Social media is just a communication channel. And so the first things that we coach when we're going into doing social media integration in a new company is by sitting down with all the people who are going to be involved in social media and talking about this topic. Social media is a communication channel. No one owns any of the communication channels, but each department owns their responsibility with each communication channel. So for example, marketing is a very heavy user of email. They might send out a blast to a customer segment talking about some new product that's getting ready to launch. And if somebody replies to one of those emails and says, I bought your last version last week, it's broken, how do I get help for this? The marketing team is usually not going to be the person that replies back to the email and walks the customer through a return process or a service process. They're going to forward that to the contact center because that's the contact center's job. With social media, it should be the same thing with customer service. We're posting ads and we're promoting content and we're publishing things all the time. And many of the questions that we get coming in are responses to that promoted content that has nothing to do with the original topic we promoted. I saw your ad. Where can I buy tickets to the show that's this weekend? You know, this product looks awesome. I'm using a different one. I have questions. How can I get help? those types of things should be routed directly to the people who are most able to help them. So before any type of technical integration discussions are really started, at its most basic, it's important just to sit down, put some basic rules of engagement together so that everyone clearly understands their roles and responsibilities. This doesn't have to be complicated. It can be very, very simple, but just having that conversation clears this up completely. So the second question that we get is one that no matter what scenario we're in, whether we're speaking at a conference or we are in a room with just one or two other people, this question, can we trust call center agents with social media? People are very, very reluctant to say those words. They'll dance all around it. Ultimately, when we bring it up and we say, is this what you mean? They'll say yes. You know, they'll kind of smile, they'll shake their head. Nobody wants to offend anyone that's working in the contact center. But the reality is that trust is something that we place on top of social media because it's a public channel. It's not private. This is really a training issue more than anything else. It's just a training issue. The reality is there is really no such thing as a private channel anymore. If I'm having a live chat online, I can take a screenshot of it and I can share it to Twitter or Facebook or any number of other places immediately. I can record my call, I can upload it to SoundCloud or Clip, I can blog about it. Even in person, in places where you are not supposed to have cell phones going, you can't hide from it. United Airlines is the latest example of this, with the guy being dragged off the plane. You're not even supposed to have your cell phone on in an airplane. We can't get away from social media. So when we talk about introducing social media, we talk about how do we train around it. And so there's some very common best practices. Start with your all-stars. Start with the ones that have some tenure, that are usually always good no matter what you assign them with, and create a little hub with them. Create a little social media team with them. Doesn't necessarily have to be a team that reports to one manager. It could be spread across a contact center, but start with those people. Create some competition around it and gamify it. Make social media exciting so that other agents have something to look forward to. Social media is a cool thing. It's not supposed to be in the contact center. And so if you're rolling this out in the same manner that you would roll any other channels out, if you're providing training around it, you're going to be in a good place. There are so many people that are worried about what their agents might say with social media. In practice, the agents are more nervous about being in the public spotlight than you think. On the phones, they know that a supervisor might be listening, and so they're cautious. They're careful to follow their, the script portions and remember to say certain things. On social media, they know that the world is watching. Provide training, trust them, you're in good hands. There are a lot of other companies that have experienced with this. Okay, so we're going to move beyond here. So use cases for social integration. So we've been talking about the contact center. That's an obvious one. Customer service usually lives there inside of big brands. One use case that isn't often thought of, but is a great use case, is the recruiting team. Speed of response when people are replying to job placements. If you're in an industry that's very competitive, that needs to hire good people, and you have somebody reaching out about a job placement, the time to respond to that person is now. It's immediate. And so if you can transfer that person that's asking about the job to the recruiter that's recruiting for the job, the higher the chance you have of hiring that person, of providing a great candidate experience. On top of that, if you're transferring that over to the recruiter, they can now keep track of those conversations in their applicant tracking system, and you can make a very well-informed decision on who you hire just based on pure having access to additional social media information. Sales is always a use case that people think about. With sales, just like maybe more important than recruiting, time is absolutely of the essence. There are all types of reports out there that associate whether or not you close a new customer with how quickly you respond to that customer when they're asking buying questions. If somebody is asking anything that sounds like they're interested in the product, it is so important to get that person in front of the right internal person to help them. The problems here are that when you have social media operating in a silo, there's no way to really do these transfers. If I call in on the phone, my cell phone happens to be with AT&T right now, and if I call in to a business's main line, my voice call might be going through level 3's network into that company, and it might be transferred to an Avaya switch system across the other side of it, and eventually it's transferred to somebody else, which forwards to their cell phone. From a phone call, I can go from one technology to another. It doesn't matter what applications or software or hardware anybody's using. I can still get to the person that I need to talk to. But with social media, there is no way to do that, or there hasn't been a way to do that. You know, if somebody comes in through Facebook and marketing, unless somebody is using that same system across the company, there's no way for me to assign that to anybody else. It's stuck right there in the walls of that social media system. So what we're doing here with our platform is we're standardizing the technology across all these different social networks so that you can use it within any other system. Just like the phone call, it doesn't matter, it shouldn't matter what application each team is using. You can transfer it from one place to another so that it gets to the best person that's able to help in that scenario. So with integrations, this is a term that is thrown around a lot by different companies. So we want to define exactly what we're talking about when we say integrations. The first type that we're talking about is data connections. This is the most popular. Usually they are pretty limited, and more often than not, it involves pulling data into the social media platform. But the amount of data that you can pull out of it is often very limited. Beyond data connections, feature integrations. This is really our specialty at HelpSocial. This is where things get really fun. This type of integration takes the features and the capabilities of the social media system so that you can put those into other systems. So earlier when we were talking about the omni-channel experience, the idea that no matter where along the customer journey that customer reaches out, the person that connects with them should understand the full context, so they should have all the data, but they should also have the capability, the features, to be able to help them, to be able to have that conversation. No matter which type of integration you're looking at, for whatever purpose you want to use it for, usually it involves connecting pieces of an application on the back end through an API. API stands for Application Programming Interface. That's basically an easy way for two completely different systems to talk to each other without a human in the middle. And that's about as technical as I'll get on this. So let's take a look at an example. So with data connections, we'll start with a CRM. Salesforce is a pretty popular one. And then over on the right, we'll take the account profile pane from a social media management system. So in this case, if Rob Legess tweets, we have some very limited information about him. We might know his other social profiles, and we can see how many followers and friends he has. In our social media application, if it comes with this feature, you might be able to see that his net sentiment, that out of 12 comments, at least 8 of them have been positive. So we know that just from looking at this, Rob generally likes us. But what we don't know about Rob is really anything else. We have no idea if Rob is a customer, if he's a partner, if he's the father to our CIO. We have no other context into what he's done in the past. So in Salesforce, if your company is using Salesforce to collect this type of data, what we'll do is we'll create a data connection so that all that information is populated within our social media system. That is pretty straightforward, and most of the enterprise social management platforms will do that. It can be expensive to make those connections, but they have that capability of bringing some of that data in. So from my seat as a social media customer service agent, when Rob tweets now or comes through Facebook or whatever, I now have more context. I can see exactly up at the top he's a customer. In his bio, somebody has said he's even a referral partner. I've got some general information about him. I can go places. There's a link to Zendesk to see his last support ticket. So I've got something. That's great from my chair on the social media team. But all the conversations that we've had with Rob so far, those 12 comments, all of that is locked inside of the social management system. So what we want to make sure of is that when we're doing data connections, we can pass the data back and forth from one place to another, that it's not trapped in any one system. Because if I'm a voice agent and I'm using Salesforce as my CRM, when Rob calls in, I need to know that he just had a Twitter conversation a few minutes ago so that I don't contradict what that agent on Twitter said. Same thing if I'm in the social media place, I need to know that Rob just called in on the phone. This is that omni-channel experience. This type of integration really is not that difficult, depending on the social management platform that you're using. In the contact center, it's really important that this happen in a customer service environment. It's also really easy. Nearly every contact center system out there has a place where data from the social media system can be imported. It can be done automatically. So when a phone call comes in, I not only have his account information, but I can see exactly what conversations were had on Facebook last week. When we're doing these data connections, it's important to know what we're getting out of them. We've done a study on with different companies on how much time is reduced just by having these types of integrations. So we can see that just by providing access to the data to tell who somebody is, what their status is as a customer, the amount of time that it takes to find the answer to a question is cut in half. Because that time is cut in half, the agents can handle more questions, so they're becoming more efficient with their process, they're becoming more productive, they can help more customers. So if we look at the other side of this, from a time perspective, there's a one-to-one correlation here. If we are reducing the amount of work it takes for an agent to help a customer, then our response times are going to improve. The average handle time, this is sometimes tricky to track in social media, but our average handle times come down. The amount of time it takes to solve a customer issue is reduced just because we're making these data connections. So I'll pause here for a second. So average handle time in a contact center, especially with a voice channel or live chat, this is very, very easy to track. You've got a start time for the phone call. You've got an end time for the phone call. So you can track your average handle time very simply. With social media, it's a little more challenging. Social media is very, very asynchronous. It can be like live chat. Somebody can ask a question, we can respond right after, and it can go back and forth until the end. But oftentimes what happens is a question comes in, you respond, it could be minutes later that the customer responds, or it might be the end of the day when they get off of work that they respond. So in those cases, we're not looking at the time between the first question to the last answer. We're really only looking at adding up the amount of time that the agent spent working with that customer when they were working. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, please contact us and we'll go into some more detail about it. So the next type of integration that we're going to look at is the features. So I mentioned this is where the things get really fun. Data connections, data type integrations are not necessarily a new topic. Companies have been doing that between systems for a long time, relatively new with social media, but not a new concept. This is something that is new being able to bring the features and the capabilities from a social media platform into something else that was never originally designed to handle social media is very new. We talked about earlier that it's important to reduce friction in order to improve the service process. We believe the best way to do that is by eliminating it altogether. So if we can take the features from one system and put it in another system and eliminate all those emails in between and all the workaround processes and go-betweens, then we're doing a really good job. So what does that look like? What you're looking at right here is our Kinect Dashboard. This is our social management application. People definitely use this to monitor social media and engage with customers, but more often than not, what we have seen is that companies will use this as a visual menu of what they can do with our API. So when they're thinking about what features should I put into my contact center system, or what types of data does my product team want streaming into their reporting systems, they'll use our dashboard as an example. And so when we say we're going to transfer a conversation from the marketing team to sales or to customer service, the best way to visualize that is by looking at this. So if we take this conversation right up at the top left with Rob Legess, we'll pick on Rob today, we're going to take that conversation and all of those features, the capabilities all around it, and we can take that exact thing and we can embed that into another system. So what a lot of people will do is they'll take that piece of it, and the easiest way to do this type of integration is they'll make it pop up in a window in an iframe. So they make it pop up in its own little window, so all you need is a browser. So when that conversation is transferred or automatically routed to an agent, the agent gets this exact pop-up. This is exactly what they see at many companies when they're doing their first type of integration. If they're using some type of CRM as the hub of their customer service system, or maybe this could be in sales, or maybe this is the applicant tracking system, it looks exactly like this. And in a lot of places, whether it may not be social media, a phone call might be popping up in a window like this. And so the agent interacts with them, then they end the task, and they're in line for the next thing. Outside of places where you have an application that you're integrating with and you're using a routing system, maybe of a contact center, you might just want to transfer this to somebody absent of any other application. What I mean by that is you don't have to integrate this with another system. So we provide links with every different conversation. And so if you want to transfer a conversation like a phone call to somebody across the business, but you might not necessarily have done an integration with that tool yet, then you can send them the link, they click on it, and the little box pops up, the little browser window pops up, and they handle it right from there. They can set their disposition codes, they can add notes, it's all saved in the same system, which is tied together with CRMs, so everybody's on the same place. Very, very, very simple to do. This type of integration that we're talking about here is very, very quick. Often we see companies do this in less than 2 weeks from the very first time that they look at our documentation. Now, if you don't want to deal with pop-up windows and iframes and making things making things pop up in other windows on top of other applications, if you want to bring these features and the data into the user interface of your own application, that is absolutely possible. Doing the steps with the iframe and the pop-up window, that's usually a first step. The goal usually for most companies is then to take the features and embed them with a user interface that the agents are already using. So a good example of this is in a contact center platform, maybe at a sales area, is using the live chat system. So we'll take the pieces out of this activity card that we care about. So we've got his name, we've got the message he sent, we've got the ability to have a conversation. The rest of it we don't care about. Our contact center system that we're integrating this stuff in, it can already handle tags, we can set disposition codes, we can transfer it to another agent if we need to. We don't need any other features, just these simple things right here. So if we're integrating this into a live chat system, then we'll take something that looks probably something like this. We'll take the message data and we make it show up right where the message would show up in a live chat conversation. And we'll take the ability to have a conversation and we'll utilize the dialog box, the send buttons. We'll use the things that are already there. This is very, very easy to do. In these types of cases, the point really is that you can take any system that wasn't necessarily built to handle social media, and with very little technical effort, you can bring it up to speed to handle it. Live chat systems are probably the easiest place to bring this in. You know, after all, with social media, all it is digital words going from one person to another. So if we take the Facebook icon off of the conversation and we put it in a live chat box, you know, can you tell a difference between a live chat and a Facebook conversation or a text message conversation? Our experience working with the contact center has been that they want to standardize it like that. They want to put the social media conversations in an environment where the agents are already familiar. They understand how to use the tools. They don't need new training, so disruption is very, very low. So by bringing it into a live chat system like this, it's a very, very easy way to integrate social media. So in terms of benefits, why would you want to do this? Well, this is a great reason. It is much, much more cost efficient to help customers over social media than it is over the phone. As you're deflecting phone calls towards social channels, social media can have a very, very real impact on your cost of service. The problem is that social media software is often very expensive. An average of about $300 a month is being generous for enterprise tools. They're often much more than that. On the contact center side, before we get into workforce optimization software and things like that, multi-channel cloud-based platforms, the higher-end platforms are typically around $150 a month, oftentimes much less than that. And so the cost, from a cost-benefit analysis, the question that a lot of companies will say is, okay, I can bring social media across all my contact center, but am I willing to take my cost from $150 a month per agent to $450 a month per agent just to be able to respond quicker? Well, by using the software that you've already got in place, that you've already invested in, using an integration method, we can take those features and very inexpensively put those into the platforms that agents are already using. So your biggest benefit off of integration is that you can scale social response efforts across a large contact center, giving you the ability to respond instantly and do that consistently. As a quick cost comparison, so to see what this really looks like from a dollars and cents term, we'll look at the traditional type of standalone siloed social media platform. In the example here, we've got 15 users on the social media team. We've got 3 admins. We'll look at average costs here. And then we look at an integration method where we're taking those features and we're putting them inside of the software we're already using. With an integration method, you're only paying on usage. So that means that when an agent clicks a button, that's when you pay for something. Another way to think about it is when an agent isn't talking to a customer, you're not paying for that agent. So if we compare the two scenarios, same size team and everything, you can see the dramatic differences in cost savings. So if we're thinking about, you know, from a technology perspective, I can scale social media across large service centers so that I can respond instantly and do it consistently. Financially, I can afford to do this. I can scale it on demand just based on the needs of traffic flow. So given a little recap here, there is no question. Consumer behavior has changed. It's going to continue to change. As we move further and further into where digital communication is becoming the primary communication, it's going to get tougher. We can't keep social media in a silo anymore. It limits our performance. It holds us back from being able to improve response times and doing that consistently. If we're able to integrate social media with our other service systems, our sales systems, we're going to speed up our service. We're going to see our customer satisfaction scores increase, and we'll definitely see a very, very big reduction in cost. So I hope this was helpful for you today. If there are questions out there, feel free to unmute your microphone and ask questions. We've got about 12 minutes left, so if you've got questions, go ahead and ask them. If you'd rather type them into the chat system, we'll take them there too. Otherwise, thank you very much for joining us today. We'll hold out for a little bit for questions. Nobody's raising their hand really quickly, so we'll ask a couple of questions and see if we've got anybody brave that wants to speak up. So when you're providing guidance on developing social media rules of engagement, some people on the call have been through these types of conversations before. Who should you involve in that conversation? Anybody want to volunteer an answer? Nope, everybody's going to be shy. Okay, well, I'll volunteer an answer. So when you're talking about rules of engagement, social media as a communication channel and who should be involved, obviously you want to have the people from anywhere around a social media team that exists right now. And if that's in marketing, then it should involve the stakeholders around that team, supporting that team. If your use case is to integrate with the contact center, then obviously you should have people from the contact center involved in that same conversation. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is just put some rules of engagement together so that everybody understands their responsibilities. People from corporate communications, PR, sometimes they're involved in these conversations as well. Doesn't need to turn into a giant round table with one person from every department around the business, but certainly the people that are going to be active in social media should be there. Okay, we did have a question come in. What are the limitations to HelpSocial's ability to integrate with my existing platforms? Usually, that's an easy question. Usually there are none. There are no limitations to our platform's ability to integrate. If there are any types of limitations, it's usually because the contact center system is pretty well dated. In those types of scenarios where you're working on mainframe type screens and there is no real place to bring data into that mainframe user interface, then in those types of cases we're using pop-up windows and things like that to bring the capabilities and the data in front of the agents. And okay, so here's a question. Is your platform currently working with any other social channels besides Facebook and Twitter? Yeah, so we work with Instagram, Facebook, that includes Facebook Messenger. We work with Facebook. We work with YouTube. Messaging networks are probably the most requested networks, most requested social platforms, I guess, that we're getting these days. Viber is in there, WeChat, Line, Kik, those are all integrations that we're working with. WhatsApp is probably the most requested out of anybody, but they don't provide their own public API to their system, or even a private API. So we don't have WhatsApp. Same thing with Snapchat, unless those two start providing an API that we can build an SLA around. We most likely will not provide them in our platform. I am aware that there's an open source project that's taken the front end of WhatsApp and turned it into an API that applications can use. Looks like that's got a pretty good community behind it, but at the end of the day, if WhatsApp decides to change something, that breaks it. So unless we're able to provide an enterprise SLA around something, we won't we won't bring it into the platform. Now, that does not mean that you could not bring it into the platform. Using our API, we'll provide access to any networks that we can build an SLA around. If you wanted to bring in WhatsApp from an open source API, or if you wanted to bring in really anything else, RSS feeds, Google Alerts, whatever you want, that's certainly possible. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll let you know when the next webinar comes out, and if you want to see the price differences that we were talking about earlier, go over to helpsocial.com/pricing. There's a calculator on the page that you can use, put in your own numbers. You'll see what things look like. And if you've got questions about how this could work with your systems, again, visit us at helpsocial.com. We'd love to have that conversation with you. Thank you so much. We'll see you later.